now to Mr. Dean.
If I remember correctly, I think I had finished my direct examination.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have some last questions you wanted to ask.
If I had, I would have lost.
Okay, Mr. Dean, thank you. Mr. Hilliard?
Thank you, Judge.
Even Snider, how are you doing?
Good, sir, yourself.
Pretty good, I can't complain.
Some of the questions I'm going to have will be a little bit repetitive, but it's just to kind of get straight in my mind. You're in the Marine Corps, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How long were you in the Marine Corps?
I had approximately 8 years active duty, and I just retired as a reserve officer about 2 years ago.
Well, thank you for your service, Agent Snider. And then you went into the FBI, correct?
That's correct.
And how long have you been there?
18 years.
Okay. And during that 18 years, what is the bulk of what you've done there?
We're in a small office here in Savannah, so for the 15 years I've been in Savannah, I've worked a little bit of everything from violent crimes against children to both international and domestic terrorism. And then for the past 10 years, I've been the coordinator for the FBI Southeast Georgia Violent Crimes Task Force.
Okay. And that's for the last 10 years, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Does it have a cool acronym? Southeast Georgia Violent Crimes Task Force? That's a mouthful.
Take the first letter of every one of those words, and that's the acronym.
Okay. How would you say that then?
I wouldn't even want to, hazard a guess.
All right. So when you got involved in this particular case, you pretty much were involved on October 5th, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And on October 5th, what exactly did you do on October 5th?
October 5th started out with a call to Detective Lemons to determine whether or not Chatham County needed the FBI's assistance.
No, I don't mean a rehash of what you've already said you did. I mean, your actual involvement. Did you conduct the interviews on October 5th? Let me ask a more specific question. So on October 5th, did you conduct any interviews on October 5th?
Conducted multiple interviews on October the 5th.
And
Yes,
who did you interview on October 5th?
October 5th, specifically the defendant, I think on two separate occasions, two interviews with the defendant. I did not speak with Paul on October 5th, but I did speak with Danny at some point on October 5th as well.
Hold on, my pen's running out. Give me 1 second. All right, so on October 5th, you spoke with Ms. Simon at least twice. You did not speak with Paul, but you did speak with Danny, correct?
That's correct.
And you spoke with Danny again on October 6th or 7th or both?
I don't recall exactly. There were multiple times. I had telephone conversations with Danny, but I know for sure I spoke with Danny on October the 7th.
Okay. So maybe on the 6th, but 7th for sure.
Absolutely.
And how about Miss Simon? You speak with Miss Simon on the 6th or 7th or no?
I don't think so. I think it was just October 5th primarily.
All right. And October 7th was the day you got permission from Danny to wire the hotel room, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I assume the hotel room was over there off of Chatham Parkway, from what my understanding was. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it was over off Chatham Parkway, wasn't it?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said you had, how was the room wired up?
I wasn't involved specifically in that aspect of we have a team that handles that. I just know that we had a room that we had rented adjacent to that room where we were able to live monitor on a video feed. Again, almost like a hotel room that has an adjoining door, that type of setup. And we had both audio and video in that room to hear what was going on.
And so you're in one room next door, videotaping and audio taping everything. They're in the other room, living their life, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And Danny knew that it was being recorded, correct?
Absolutely.
And Miss Simon did not, correct?
She did not.
Okay. And How long did that recording last?
Less than 24 hours. I think we had it. They stayed the evening there, and they checked out the following day. So I don't know the exact number of hours that we had it, but it was less than 24,
So 10/7 to 10/8 maybe?
approximately.
Or 10/8 to 10/9, whatever it was, somewhere in that time frame. Is that correct?
I would have to look at a report to verify that, but I don't know the exact date. No, sir.
The date's not important. The point is for that time period, it was pretty much around the clock surveillance, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And he also gave you permission to tap his phone, correct?
That's correct. He did.
And how long did that last?
It was at least 30 days. I think we did one renewal, so it may have been for a 60-day period. But again, there was another agent that was handling the administrative aspects of that. I believe it was possibly 60 days.
Okay. Well, and I'll ask, did you review the video and audio tape of the hotel room?
Just excerpts of that. Again, there were multiple facets to this investigation, and that's not something that I personally did, was review that particular video.
So you saw excerpts, but you didn't watch the whole thing?
That's correct.
I assume anything of any importance or what you deem relevant, you would look at, correct?
Not necessarily. The agent that was responsible, for that would have reviewed that and highlighted that.
And who was the agent that was responsible for that?
I believe that was Special Agent Solomon that had that responsibility.
All right. So Solomon was the one who was ahead of that particular
That's correct.
endeavor, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. And Danny's phone, who was the special agent in charge of that one? Was that you or is that Agent Solomon as well?
The particular aspects, so both Agent Solomon and myself obtained the consent, from Mr. Youngkin to get the authorization to wiretap that phone. But the day-to-day monitoring of that phone was Special Agent Solomon's responsibility.
Okay, and that's fine. So Solomon basically watched the video and audio from the hotel room and reviewed the tap on the phone, correct?
That's correct. Again, not solely her responsibility. There were, multiple, people reviewing that, but primarily it fell on her shoulders.
Okay, and that's fine. So, but you did interview Danny on the 5th, maybe the 6th, but definitely the 7th, correct?
That's correct. And again, I had, in between those times, I had multiple telephone conversations with Danny as well.
All right. And do you recall the conversation and the interview you had with Danny on October 5th?
You have to give me more clarification on that, sir.
Well, have you, in preparation for trial, have you reviewed that interview with him?
Which particular interview, sir?
The first interview you had with Mr. Youngkin.
I'm sure I have at some point.
Okay. And do you remember when he said there was nothing weird about her going to Arkwright Drive in that interview?
Not specifically, but again, she provided that information in the interview that I was present for, that she had been to Arkwright Drive 100 times or more.
Okay. Did he ever say that he had gone to Arkwright Drive?
I don't know that Danny had mentioned that to me, but we do know through the course of the investigation that Danny accompanied her. Either he was driving or the defendant was driving on the numerous occasions that they traveled to Arkwright Road.
Did he ever talk about going out there by himself?
Not that I recall, no, sir.
Did he ever admit to going out there by himself, to the best of your knowledge? To you, at least.
Not that I recall.
Okay. Now, in that initial interview, do you remember him saying that he was awake when she got back from Arkwright?
Your Honor, I'm going to object on hearsay grounds to I'm glad if he's live, and any further questions about what Danny did or didn't say. He's testified at this point.
Mr. Hilliard?
Your Honor, it's not hearsay. He's already testified, okay? This is the agent that conducted the interview. I have the absolute right on cross-examination to talk about the inconsistencies in Danny Youngkin's statements to him versus what he testified here in court. So whatever issue he has, it's not hearsay, number one. Danny's already testified to this. Number two, the agent has the right to testify as to his recollections. If he doesn't recollect it, great, we move on. But if he does, it's a proper cross-examination question, Judge.
Mr. Dean?
I just don't think that's a proper reading of the current rules of evidence that have been in place for the last 10 years or so. If there was something that Mr. Youngkin was confronted with while he was up there and given a chance to confirm, deny, explain, then it would be a proper subject for testimony by another witness. But if not, you can't just ask another witness what a witness who testified previously said just because they testified.
Before we go any further into the weeds in this argument, I'm going to allow you leeway to go ahead and ask these questions. I'm overruling the objection.
Thank you, Judge. So, Agent Snider, do you remember Danny saying that he, at 3:30 when he got up to feed Sky, that Quentin was okay? And he saw him?
I don't recall that, no, sir.
Okay. Do you remember him saying at 5:30 that Quentin was okay?
I do recall Danny saying that on October the 5th, but in the October the 5th interview, it was unfathomable to Danny, that something like this had taken place. So while Danny did, on October 5th, during that interview, mention that he did indeed see Quentin, we further went down that path with Danny on multiple occasions, specifically October 7th, and he could not recall seeing Quentin as he walked out of that bed that morning. It was a rush that morning. He was late for work. The positioning of his bed.
Your Honor,
The
at this
dark
point in time, I'm
hours.
going to object. It's non-responsive to the question I asked, number one. He's basically giving a narrative to what was basically a yes or no question. I understand he's trained to do that, but it's still improper.
Mr. Dean?
It's a general proposition that the witness is allowed to finish his answer. Mr. Hilliard is the one that's inviting all this testimony about out-of-court statements made by Daniel Youngkin. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, as nobody says anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Special Agent, you do speak in paragraphs. So, Mr. Hilliard, ask your question. Agent, answer the question.
Isn't it true on October 5th that Danny Youngkin stated that he had glanced in the crib at 5:30 and Quentin was okay?
That's what he stated on October the 5th.
Okay. Now, isn't it also true that he also said he was the one that texted the babysitter that the kids were staying home that day, correct? On October 5th.
Danny did state that on October the 5th.
Okay. Now, do you remember during the conversation where Danny got angry and said that he needed to drink?
Could you please restate that one, please, sir?
I will. Do you recall him stating that he's having a bad day, it feels weird, and that he drinks all the time and needed a drink to even himself out?
And what date was that, sir?
October 5th, I believe. If you don't remember it, that's fine.
Mr. Hilliard?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask, why is defense asking these questions?
Well,
No, Mr. Dean.
you have to have Mr. Hilliard monologize on his theory of the case in the presence of the jury.
Approach.
I'll do it if he will, Judge, I promise. If he'll refrain from doing it, I'll be glad to.
No, y'all approach the bench. The other attorneys come too. Mr. Hilliard?
Yes.
All right, Agent Snider. So let's go back to October 7th meeting with Mr. Youngkin. Okay? So you set up, did the hotel and the wiretap, right? But then that all went into place that night or the next day? Whatever it
What about
says
the
on
next day?
right. Whatever it says on the
October 8th.
paperwork is what it did, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so, did you conduct any surveillance other than those two things of the parties?
In what aspect, sir?
Well, I mean, we know that you had the audio and the video in the hotel room. We know that you had Mr. Youngkin's phone tapped. We know that you'd already pulled all of the phone records at that point, correct? Did you ever pull any, and you may or may not have, I'm just asking, did you ever put any of the other family members under surveillance or anything like that?
We placed a pole camera, a camera on a telephone pole outside the residence of the defendant.
Okay. And that's at 535 Buckhalter?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Right. How long was that there?
I couldn't tell you for sure, sir. It was, 30 days at the most.
Now, during the interview that we just saw with Miss Simon, you kept making statements to her. Some of those statements were true, but not all of those statements were true, were they?
You'd have to,
Point you to the inconsistent or
Exactly.
incorrect statements? Well, one of the things you said was that Paul says something entirely different than what you do. Okay. What was it that Paul said that was entirely different? I don't recall.
yeah, so I think the clear piece there is Paul told the truth.
Well, that's your answer, but I asked you a specific question. What was the item of information that Paul said that Leilani didn't say?
Yeah, again, throughout the course of the investigation, Paul told the truth, and the defendant didn't tell the truth.
Your Honor, that's a non-responsive answer. Please instruct the witness to answer the question.
Agent, if you would please listen to the question and as best you can answer the question.
You made a statement that Paul said something entirely different than Leilani Simon in the interview we just watched. What was that piece of information that was completely different?
Objection. Hearsay. And I can elaborate if the court would like me to.
You can elaborate.
Okay.
Did you want us to approach?
Sure.
Agent Snider, isn't it a common interrogation technique to use half-truths or complete falsities in order to try and induce a defendant to make a statement to you?
That's correct. We do that through the course of our investigations.
And isn't it also an interrogation technique that you will try and put stress and strain on them along the way to try and induce them to make a statement to you?
That is a technique.
Okay. And stirring up those emotions and keeping them in emotional turmoil is a fairly common interrogation technique, is it not?
That can be a technique that's utilized, yes.
Okay. And is that the technique you employed here?
The video speaks for itself.
Okay. And so you're saying that was not the technique you employed here then?
Specifically, the technique used in this one was something we refer to as a SUE. That's the strategic use of evidence to get to the facts of the investigation.
Well, let's talk about that. You had multiple interviews with Ms. Simon, correct?
Multiple, yes, sir.
And I guess it's safe to say that many of them were similar to this one, correct?
They were, yes, sir.
Okay. And the one thing is through all of those interviews, she's never admitted to harming her child in any way, correct?
I wouldn't say that's 100% correct, no, sir.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Did she say that she shot her kid?
She did not, no, sir.
Did she say that she stabbed her kid?
She did not, no,
Did she
sir.
say that she strangled her kid?
No, sir, she did not.
Did she say that she beat her kid with a blunt object?
At no point in time did she say she committed a violent act.
Okay. So that was a consistent statement throughout all of the strategic use of evidence. She's never made that statement to you or anyone else, correct?
That's correct.
Let's talk about the hotel camera. So you have the hotel camera. You say that Danny was aware of it. She was not. Did she ever make any statements to Danny in that hotel room like that?
Again, I didn't review 100% of that video, so I couldn't 100% answer that with accuracy.
All right, well then let's back it up. Did Agent Solomon tell you it was a relevant portion for you to look at and send it to you?
I don't recall, no, sir.
Was that something you would normally recall if you got?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you didn't get it. It wasn't sent to you, right?
That's correct, yes, sir.
All right. Same thing. You had tapped his phone for 60 days at least, and I assume you got all relevant text, phone calls, or intercepts from Leilani Simon to Danny Youngkin, correct?
We got every call that came into Danny Youngkin's phone, both incoming, outgoing calls, just as your phone would obtain those calls. We received every call that came into Danny Youngkin's phone.
And did you review those calls, or were you told the relevant portions of those calls in text with the defendant?
I don't recall the exact number, but you can imagine in a 30 to 60 day period, there were hundreds of calls. So no, I did not review every call, but there were pertinent calls that we do have.
Okay. Any of those pertinent calls say, I harmed my child, or I did this to my child?
Not that I recall, no, sir.
Okay. And again, this is after 60 days of around-the-clock monitoring, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Now, I want to talk to you about the interview that we just watched again, and what's a Perk 30?
It's a opioid narcotic, commonly used following, minor to major surgeries as a painkiller.
Okay. It's like, when you say opiate, is it like Oxycontin or something like that? I mean, I don't know what it is. I'm asking you because you'll know more than I will. But what exactly would a common name be that we know it by?
I'm not exactly sure. I know it's a combination of like an acetaminophen, so a Tylenol-based drug, in conjunction, with an opioid, a fentanyl, type drug. So it's a lesser degree of a fentanyl, drug in the opioid classification.
All right. And I assume cocaine. Well, let me ask you this. Do you have any knowledge of what the effect of a Perk 30 is on somebody if they take it? If you don't, that's fine.
No, I think the defendant explained that herself.
Okay. And And what was that effect then?
Best I can recall from seeing the video that you watched was a drunken state, a loopy state. The specific pill that she took had a delayed reaction, she said. I couldn't explain past that.
And that's fine. You might not know. What about cocaine?
What she was doing in the perk, taking the Percocet, the cocaine, and marijuana, commonly referred to on the street, if you will, as speedballing, and those three drugs are what she admittedly was on that night.
Does cocaine put you to sleep, or is it more of a stimulant?
Again, I couldn't tell you, for sure, but it's my understanding that it affects people in different ways. Some individuals it acts as a stimulant, and some individuals it does put to sleep.
Well, based upon your experience and training, okay, what have you been trained that the effects of it are?
Again, as I disclosed in an interview, I'm not a narcotics agent, but I can tell you, what she said, what I've heard from other individuals, and that's all I can tell you.
Okay. And was I correct that, and I may have just misheard it, but on the interview that we just watched, did Miss Simon say that Misty or Missy had smoked weed or done drugs, something of that point? It was a very fleeting thing. I may have misheard it. I'm just asking you if you recall something like that.
I do recall that. That was about midway through this October the 12th interview, where I allowed her to continue to tell the same story that she had told over and over and over about the Orajel. And when we confronted her on that the first time, she tried to, say, well, the reason that she probably doesn't remember that is because she smokes crack. So defamation of character to a young lady who wasn't even involved in this entire process.
Again, Your Honor, I ask the witness to please answer the question and not proselytize. It's non-responsive.
I'm going to say two things. One, he's answering the question. I'm going to ask you not to go any further than you need to.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Agent Snider, with your investigation, I guess, of this case, you conducted interviews, you set up the landfill search, and you've been involved in it pretty much from the beginning, is that correct?
100%, yes, sir.
Okay. So, when you said you only got the excerpts from the hotel and video, right? Of Danny and Leilani in the hotel? You were only given short pieces of video to watch, correct?
I've seen short clips of the video. That's correct, yes, sir.
And were you given daily summaries of what happened, or summaries of what happened for that entire time frame? I know you didn't monitor it.
There was probably a point in time, where the case team got together and we discussed,
Okay.
that particular CCTV footage. That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. And the only people that were in that hotel room, though, was Danny and Leilani, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
I don't believe Zane or Sky were there, and I don't believe anybody else was there, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. And Agent Solomon was the one who was in charge of that one, though, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you also, I think that's all the questions I got, Judge. I'll leave it right there.
Any redirect?
One moment, please.
Mm-hmm.
No redirect, Ron.
All right, very good. So, shall this witness be released?
I'm thinking so, Judge, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. You're excused.